Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for our first UQ Women in Engineering Challenging Yourself Professional Development Series workshop presented by Teagan Dowler. My name's Kyle Williams and I'm the Deputy Director of Engagement and Philanthropy in the Faculty of Engineering, Architecture and Information Technology. I'd also like to introduce Candice Lamb, Chair of the UQ Women in Engineering Alumni Ambassador Council, and will be facilitating today's workshop. Okay, before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands in which we meet. On behalf of the University of Queensland, we pay our respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. We recognise their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. I'd like to briefly share some information about the UQ Women in Engineering Alumni Council. The WEAC is made up of a passionate team of UQ alumni from various engineering backgrounds, including Candice Lamb, our Council Chair, Mushfiq Rahman, our Vice Chair, Trang Pham, Karen Zoe, Kate Heliotis, Rick Murphy, and Jennifer Ross. As a council, they work in partnership with us at UQ to develop engagement activities for our community of alumni. We hope to help foster a sense of UQ community and support amongst engineering graduates and industry colleagues, both male and female, who in turn will continue to help build a diverse path for future engineers. Okay, I'd now like to introduce our presenter for today, Teagan Dowler, who'll be talking about your behaviour, your brand, stepping out of your comfort zone to elevate reputation. Teagan is the founder of the BCW, an organisation dedicated to improving inclusion and diversity in the heavy industries. Teagan has worked across a range of industries, including civil construction, iron ore, coal, finance and health, in the areas of organisational change, leadership development and coaching. She has had the opportunity to work with over 500 leaders in the heavy industries to help them shift mindsets, behaviour and performance. Teagan is also the author of Rules of the Game, Women in Masculine Industries, is a co-founder of the Diversity Practitioners Association in Queensland, and also sat on the Ministerial Committee for the School for Student Leadership in Victoria for 9 years. Thanks, Teagan, and now over to you.
Lovely, thanks Kyle. Hi everyone, thank you so much for giving up your time today to dial in and hear us talk about an interesting topic. Yes, it's about reputation and brand, but it's also about giving you a tool set that can be used not only to help enhance your reputation and your connection with all sorts of people, but it can help you in being able to communicate effectively, manage conflict in a whole range of areas in your life. So it's quite a broad tool and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you today. So I'll share my screen. Okay. So today, what we are going to go through is a quick little background on myself. I know Kyle gave you a little introduction there, but then we'll dive into what reputation is and what it means for us. Then we're going to get into the really meaty part, so the interesting aspect, which we are going to look at some behavioural profiles under the tool called the DISC tool. And then at the end is where we start to talk about some strategies that you can use to enhance your reputation with a whole range of diverse types of individual. And as Kyle said, at the end and peppered throughout, there'll be opportunities for you to ask questions. So I really encourage you to think about how the content applies to your real world and your circumstances and take the opportunity to ask questions. Righto, so a little bit about myself. I have been working in the heavy industries for just shy of 15 years, and the bulk of what I do is actually working with frontline leaders. And no surprising, in the heavy industries, the majority of frontline leaders are males, tend to be older males. And my job is to get them to shift behaviour and shift performance, improve their performance. So you can imagine coming in as a stranger into their world, trying to get them to change is a really big ask at times. And when I was quite early in my career, I was lucky enough to come across this behavioural model called DISC. and I actually use it in my own job. And really, the most important part of my job is building trust with strangers. If they're going to be able to trust what I'm asking of them, trust the challenges that I present to them, and trust the process, I need to make sure that I have a good reputation with them. And so this model has helped me be able to, in a matter of 10 minutes of having a conversation with someone, be able to pick up little cues and hints that gives me a head start to think around, well, how am I going to build a relationship, a positive relationship with this person, so that we can get the outcomes that we need down the track. And so that's what I'll be sharing with you today. What are those little cues and tricks that you can use? So what is reputation? Well, look, it's tempting to think that we can control our reputations, that we get to define what people think of us. But the reality is that we can only control our behaviour, the words we use, the way we present, the work that we produce. What we don't get to control is how people interpret that, how they feel about all those things that we're presenting. So our reputation is highly subjective and is a qualitative belief about what people think about us, i.e. it's their opinion. So holistically, reputation is not just who we are and what we do, it's actually what people think about us. And the tricky part is everybody has a different perception of us. And that perception is based on their own unique perspective, their background, their own preferences. And today what I'm going to show you is a tool, the DISC tool, that helps you to understand what are those preferences. What are those things that people hold as important to them that you can tap into to start enhancing your relationship and your reputation in their eyes. So what is DISC? DISC is a behavioural model. It's not a personality test. There is a bit of contention around whether it's personality or behaviour. And the reason I settle on the behavioural aspect is because the DISC model talks about the behaviours that we can see. It doesn't talk about those deep-seated personality factors that we can't change. The good thing about behaviour is that we have that ability to adjust our behaviour. We can behave in any way that we want. Now we know though that there's some behavioural styles that we all have that's comfortable for us. And then there's other times when we have to behave in a certain way that can be challenging or fatiguing. So DISC looks at what's that preference that each person has. And what we tend to find is that we like people that behave like us. It's comfortable. We can communicate similarly. We deal with conflict in the same way. We are motivated by the same types of things. And so DISC helps us to understand why is it that we actually connect well with someone, and why is it that sometimes there are these people that we work with or interact with that you just think, oh my gosh, why are they doing things that way? It just makes no sense to me. So DISC gives us that ability to build self-awareness about our own self, our own behaviour, and that helps us in the interactions that we have with others because we become self-aware. But it also gives us an understanding or a common language that we can use when, particularly if you do DISC with a group or within an organisation, it helps to provide a safe space and a safe language for us to discuss our differences, because often differences lead to conflict. And I think that's because we are so worried about difference being a bad thing rather than actually seeing difference as a benefit. So as I go through today, I'll be explaining to you there's 4 different key behavioural types in the DISC model, D-I-S-C, for anyone playing along at home. But what I want to make sure we emphasise is that this model is not about changing who you are. DISC is about recognising your core value, the core value that you bring, and staying true to that, but challenging yourself in certain circumstances to be flexible with your behaviour. And I like to think of it in terms of being strategic. So if you're dealing with a certain type of person, you might want to behave in a certain way so that you can connect in well with that person, so that you can have a better relationship and get the outcome, the longer term outcome that you need from that person. So let's dive into the model. Well, before we do, I should say as well, the whole concept around DISC is treating people like an iceberg. So we look at, when we're interacting with someone, we want to be starting to pick up little cues, as I mentioned before, about how they're behaving. Because when you start to look at those behaviors, that gives you an idea around what's sitting under the surface for someone. So if you can see my little cursor, all the stuff that's under the surface are the things that feed our behavior. So for instance, that can be our values, our morals, our experiences, our genetics to a certain degree on some behavioral aspects, and even our personality. And what tends to happen is when things come along in our world and bump into our iceberg, that's when we react based on all those things underneath, and we demonstrate a certain behavior. So our behaviors are really excellent to giving a clue of what's under the surface. So when we start to look at the DISC model, the behaviors that you want to start looking at in people can be basically plotted along two axes. So your vertical axis there looks at how someone views themselves within the environment that they operate in. So at the top of the axis, you can see someone who would be up there feels that they are more powerful than the environment. They feel that they have the ability to control the world around them, that whatever happens in their world, they're fine, they've got it, they'll be able to cope. Now, on the flip side, at the bottom part of the axis, you've got individuals who feel that the environment impacts on them, that they actually don't have the power to change or influence the environment around them. So these individuals will tend to be a lot more introspective, do a lot more thinking internally, rather than the people at the top of the axis who tend to be a bit more externally focused. And you can roughly plot, you may have heard of the concepts of extroversion and introversion. So you can basically plot extroverts sit about here on the axis and introverts sit here. So introverts at the bottom, extroverts at the top. The next aspect that we look at in regards to trying to determine the profile of someone is we look at their motivation. Are they task focused? So are they all about getting results, focusing on the outcome and the goal? Or on the other side, are they people focused? Are they interested in the culture, the team members, the friendly banter that you have when you're at work and in a team? And yes, we'll get to the task eventually, but the most important thing is that people are getting along and people are happy. So that then gives us our 4 quadrants. And it's our D, our I, our S, and our C. Now, D stands for dominant, and these individuals task focused and feel as though they can influence the environment. Then you've got your I people, your influencers. They feel as though they also can control the environment, but they are all about the people. They're very focused on the team. Your S stands for people who are steady or steadiness. These love the team vibe and the culture, but don't feel that they have the ability to exert change on the environment around them. And then similarly with your C person, your conscientious person, they also don't like to create change in their environment, but are very focused on task. So for the next few minutes, what I want to take you through is each of the 4 quadrants. Now, this is a very fast run through of the DISC model. It's a taster, really, but hopefully you can take some things away that you can start applying straight away this afternoon if you're at work. What we will do, as Kyle mentioned, at the end of each description of the 4 profiles, you'll have a couple of minutes to ask some questions, if you'd like, about each of the profiles. So I'll go through and I'll give you a very stereotypical example and description of the type of behaviour you might see someone exhibit if they have a behavioural preference in each quadrant. What I should also mention is that it's very, very common for people to have a little bit in a couple of quadrants. So it's more common for someone to be both a D and an I, or a C and a D, or an S and a C, rather than just say a pure S. So you may, as we're going through, pick up a little bit of, you might be able to relate to a little bit in each quadrant. So think about yourself, think about your own behavioural profile. Some of you may have also had the opportunity to do that little free DISC assessment online that I believe was sent in an email yesterday. So see if that came out as accurate as we go through this model today. But also think about the people that you work with. You know, start thinking in mind about the people that you really enjoy interacting with, but also think about the people that you find challenging to interact with and see where you think they might sit on this model. All right, let's do it. So your D style person, this is your dominance individual. They are all about getting the job done, very focused on the task, and they will stop at nothing to make sure that they achieve. They are very goal orientated and they like to do it their way. So they don't like to be challenged necessarily. They like to make sure that the goal that they've got in mind is theirs and it's actually going to make them look good. So because they're achievement driven, they are motivated by winning. They can be very, very competitive at times. And because of that, they are known for being very firm, very direct, to the point of blunt and aggressive at times. And they like to, well, they can sometimes be very ego driven. Now, when it comes to communication, they have a very, as it says, they're very direct style. They don't like to beat around the bush. They get straight to the point, don't have a lot of fluff in the conversation, very business focused. Conflict, they actually don't mind conflict. They find it energizing. So a D person will actually jump into any dogfight because they see it as a chance to win. So when you are having a conflict with a D, the last thing you want to do is go head to head with them. You've got to be a little bit more strategic to work with them through conflict. Now, is there any questions that have come up from the D? Does anyone feel like they can relate to a D style? Let's see if we've got any questions coming up. Kyle, is there any questions regarding Ds?
No, not at the moment.
That's okay. We'll see. I wonder if people have had the experience of working with Ds before. They're very, how do I explain? Very obvious when you work with a D.
There's a couple coming up in the chat. Stacey says she's a D.
Uh-huh.
And there's another one saying that they believe their boss would be a D.
Yes.
And the question has just come through, Teagan. How do you strategically communicate with a D?
Great. So we're definitely going to go into the how-tos at the end, but be direct, be straight to the point. Make sure that you go in prepared with a D and do business, just talk business, unless you've got a good relationship with them straight up. But if it's a new D that you're meeting, just talk about business and be very results orientated. You also want to display confidence, because if you've got a D who is, how do I explain this? Someone who has a bit of arrogance around them, they'll smell fear. So when you have a D, you've got to make sure that you go in with confidence, and then a lot of work around body language as well. So making sure that you're upright, taking up space, but we'll cover more in a little bit. Any other questions about the D? Okay.
That's it, Teagan.
Cool. Let's keep going. So the next model that we have, the next profile that we have is our I. So this is our influence person. These are the team players. They're the life of the party. Often in a team, they'll be really obvious to see because they'll be the first person to say hi. You know, I go into new teams all the time, and more often than not, it's the I person that'll come up and introduce themselves to me. They are outgoing, they are chatty, they love to talk, they're oversharers, for instance. Very, very high energy. As it says there, they're enthusiastic and they always see the good in people. They tend to be big picture thinkers as well. So they've got lots of goals, lots of dreams. They will also tend to have lots of things on the go. So because they're so optimistic and positive about everything, they get distracted about shiny things. for instance. So they'll start lots of projects and go, oh, that sounds great, let's do that. Oh, that sounds excellent, let me get involved. But unfortunately, their strength is not completing those projects. So a lot of I's that I work with, and a little bit of that in myself as well, they will tend to get all these big ideas, but don't actually execute. So they might have all these projects started at home that they haven't finished. With an I, they really get a lot of energy from their team members. So it's really important for an I that they feel that they're in a team that is cohesive, that everyone's getting along, and people are actually feeling positive about the interaction. Because if they're not, an I starts to withdraw. If they feel that someone's angry with them, they will be very, very uncomfortable. Now, because an I shares that extroversion aspect up here, that ability to influence the environment, and I will often try and fix the problem, address the problem if they feel that someone's upset with them. So they'll engage in conflict, but they do it differently than a D. A D goes into win conflict, and I goes into conflict to fix it so that we can all go back to being friends. Now, when it comes to I's communication style, they will also tend to be very fast in how they're communicating. So they'll talk 10 to the dozen and use lots of words. Now, has anyone got any questions about an I? Anything coming through?
Yeah, there are a couple here, Teagan. So we've got one from Natalie, and it's quite a good one about the current online work environments that we've been working in. So now that we're all meeting online through Zoom, etc., does it affect your ability to make this type of assessment of people?
Oh, great idea. Great question. It will impact a little bit about the assessment, to be able to make these assessments with people, but you can still, by looking at, by listening to how someone communicates, how many words they use. Are they very short in their sentences, or do they use a lot of padding? Is there a lot of emotion in their words, or are they quite direct and unemotive? If you listen to their conversation, whether they say we or I, if it's we and us, then I'd be putting them down towards the people focus of things. But if they're talking about the task and getting the job done, I'd be starting to put them down towards the task side of things, so a D or a C. You can also, by looking at some of the body language aspects, do get challenged when we're doing over Zoom. But what we tend to find is that people who are on the extrovert side of things tend to be a bit more animated in their body language, whereas those that are on the introvert side of things are a little bit more reserved. So you might be able to pick up a few things like that on the webinar aspect. But what is interesting is, in this environment, each of the different profiles are going to be responding differently to this social distancing. And I know a team that is currently using, I forget the app, what it is, but it's a mood checker. So every day they check on how their team is feeling. Now, I would say that was an I person who suggested that to the team, to bring in that kind of technology. Because then when I talk to the C's and the D's in the team, they go, oh, that app is the worst thing, what a waste of time. Because they're all task focused. So how, the needs that we have now as a team and as individuals will be challenged by this social distancing. So you can use DISC to think about, if you're running a team, what are those needs of your individuals based in this weird new environment? And you can start to think, how do I need to adjust my behavior or tailor my approach to satisfying my team members?
Just another question here, Teagan. Are I's the gonna do's? i.e. I'm gonna do that, but then don't deliver.
Tend to be more so, yeah, yep. So they'll overpromise. That can be a risk for I's, overpromise and underdeliver. So as an I, it's very important to make sure that you're realistic in what you can deliver and achieve.
And just one last question, Teagan. If you're an I, what are the traits that are most frustrating to the other quadrants, and how do you effectively calm down to be able to better interact with the other quadrants?
So I guess the most important thing is understanding what quadrant someone sits in, because you'll want to adjust yourself differently based on those people. Remember, don't ever stray away from your fabulous I-ness. This is not about being inauthentic to yourself, but it's just about making sure that you can be flexible and, as I said before, strategic in your behavior. So if you're an I with trying to engage with a D, you want to minimize the energy and the over exuberance, because for both a D and a C, because they'll see that as fluff. They'll see that as potentially being negative towards your reputation and your ability to deliver, because remember, they're all about focusing on the task. So when you're engaging with a D or a C, making sure that you come in looking very prepared, that you are confident, but also calm and measured in your approach. Still, when you're dealing with a D, the confidence that you have as an I is very important to make sure you still contain that. But if you're engaging with a C, you don't have to show that, that raw confidence as much. What you need to do with a C is make sure you're prepared, that you deliver what you say you're going to do, and you look organized. Now, if you're dealing with an S, what you might need to do is just, as you said, calm down a little bit. So being conscious to not, rattle off words 10 to a dozen, making sure that your body language isn't too in their face. But an S will tend to feel a little bit more comfortable with an I, because you've got that personal connection. Both profiles want to have a positive relationship. So it's around figuring out how you manage your energy levels to get that. Okay. So now our C style person. Oh, sorry, our S style person. My apologies. So our S person is our steadiness person. Now, apparently the S style is the most common style of the population. And DISC has been around for many, many decades. It was based on the work of William Marston in the 1920s. So it's been done by millions of people. And what they've found is that an S tends to be the most prominent behavioral style in humans. The steadiness person is all about maintaining the status quo. So they don't like to have rapid change. They like to make sure that there's consistency, and they don't get too frazzled about things, and they don't like it when other people get frazzled. So what they tend to be is incredibly patient. They're excellent at teaching people different techniques or different systems because of that incredible patience. They don't rush people. They're very tactful and mindful about other people and their feelings. They're up this end, so it's all about people and relationships. They're also incredibly humble. So if their teams achieve something, you'll hear them talk about the team or we or they, rather than putting themselves forward. Because they're down the bottom here around that introversion side of things, they won't want to be the person that stands up the front and gets the applause if they've done a good job. I know in some teams they have public shares or praises, and winning an award like that in public might actually be very, very uncomfortable, very cringeworthy for them. And they tend to also be quite reserved. So the S's will put other people before themselves. And if something happens that they are uncomfortable with or that they don't agree with, they are less likely to tell the other person that they're uncomfortable. And an S person will bottle things up and bottle things up and bottle things up until one day, and I've seen this happen a couple of times, the bottle is too full and the bottle explodes. And there's S all over the place. And it's a very big emotional reaction that will happen with an S. And people are trying to go, wow, where'd that come from? I've never seen them react like that. But what's happened is the S person has accommodated and put others before themselves, and their bottle's gotten too full. So if you're an S person, it's really important to ensure that you are trying to prioritize yourself and finding ways to be open with how you're feeling, particularly if there's a lot of change that's happening in your world, because change can be very uncomfortable for an S. Again, being down here, feeling that the They are less powerful than the environment. Change can be very uncomfortable. An S person will want it to be a nice, not rushed, being very measured and thought out, and for them to understand what support will be in place for the change to progress. You know, your D's and your I's up here because they feel they can change the environment. They will change just for change's sake because they get bored easily. But people on this side go, whoa, do we have to change things? Conflict probably doesn't come as a surprise. Do not enjoy conflict. We'll avoid at all costs. So has anyone started to think about whether they're an S, whether they have S's in their life? Any questions?
Yes, there are a couple here, Teagan. So one is, won't the environment have an influence on the behavioural choices people make? I.e., if someone is always in a subordinate position with a boring job, they're more likely to demonstrate S and C behaviours, while others, or someone who is more privileged will operate at D/I.
Okay, great question. So many things in there to unpick. So what we tend to find is that certain roles will attract certain styles of profiles. So in my work, it's more common for me to find a D person rather than an S person in, say, a superintendent or a manager position. What we tend to find is actually in the technical and engineering professions, people will be a lot of C's and S's and D's, very little I's that'll be in that space. In the example that you gave around that if you're in a job that is more of a subordinate position, your experience will be different based on your profile. So D's can absolutely still be subordinates, but they might need to be managed in a very different way by their manager than someone who's an S, because they'll be having different challenges in that subordinate position. Now, in regards to the behavior, the environment impacting the behavior, yeah, the environment can. I know that if you're working in a very challenging environment that's very task focused, you might start to move your profile across to the task focus, because you know that's the kind of behavior you need to display to get ahead. But I haven't seen, oh wait, I lie. I've probably seen one person in my entire time of coaching that has actually gone from one side of the quadrant to the other. Most people don't change rapidly. So what you will find though is in different environments, you might be stressed differently. So as I said to you before, I have an I, but I've also got a strong D as well. So when I was growing up, I was ID, but now I'm DI. And what happened is, because I had to become a lot more results focused, I've started to exhibit more D tendencies. Hopefully that answered the question.
Teagan, are there any strategies to identify when an S is uncomfortable to prevent their bottle from exploding?
Yeah, yep. They're like an onion. I heard someone describe it like an onion. So S's will be very good at hiding the fact that they're bottling things up. So if you've got an S, a team member that you're working with, or even a friend, it's little things, and you've got to just gently keep bringing it up, providing the space, the calm space, the supportive space for them to feel that they can be honest and divulge how they're feeling. You know, with a D or an I, they'll tell you straight off the bat how they're feeling if they're unhappy about something. You've got to be patient with an S and keep making sure you've got that relationship, a strong relationship, before they'll then start telling you how they're feeling. So it's not a quick fix with an I. You might see that they'll become a little bit more withdrawn perhaps, but yeah, you have to, it's subtle, very subtle cues with an S.
Just one last question, Teagan. Why is the S quadrant so strong in the population when introverts are generally in the minority?
Ah, okay. I didn't know that introverts were in the minority. That's news for me. Okay, and surprising for me. I'll have to research that. But I don't know about why S's are the strongest profile, but I suppose, you know, my guess is that because the S is the team player ultimately. You know, we can't have too many chiefs in the kingdom, you know, too many Ds. It would just be this constant conflict. You just have to look around the globe at what's happening there, and a lot of our leaders are Ds. But our S's are individuals who are highly reliable and just get in and get things done. They don't make a fuss. But yeah, I'll have to have a look into that extrovert and introvert aspect. I'm most intrigued. All right. Okay, so moving on to our C styles. So this is our conscientious person. This individual is over on the task focus side of things, but also on the down here on the aspect around feeling less powerful than the environment. So a conscientious person, as the word suggests, is very diligent. So they are focused on accuracy, correctness. They like to make sure that they have checked everything. They're very thorough. As it says, they're very analytical and precise, systematic. So if there's a process that has to be followed, they will follow it to the letter of the law. If the process is going to get changed, that's very uncomfortable for a C, unless they are the ones that think it should change. If a change is being forced upon a C, they will want to make sure they've had plenty of time to thoroughly review why we're changing, what's the benefit going to be, and have we thought out well that this change is going to be better. Now, C's are quite reserved in their body language, quite reserved in their communication. They can sometimes be seen as not sharing enough information. So when I work with leaders, they can sometimes, if they've got C people in their team, they sometimes find it very difficult to get updates, you know, project status updates. How are they going? Because the C person, whilst they love the detail, if they don't have a good relationship with their leader, they'll use information, they'll withhold information as a bit of a power play. C's pride themselves on their quality of work, so they have very strong attention to detail. If they make a mistake in regards to that it can be quite impactful on them, can be quite embarrassing. So they like their work to be regarded at a high level and for people to really respect their capability in that regards. When it comes to conflict, they will avoid conflict unless they know that they are right. And then if they are right, they won't back away from it, but they won't necessarily challenge directly. They'll often do an approach where they will, I guess, be passive aggressive in the conflict, but they will hold very strongly to their view. In regards to communication, they can sometimes frustrate the other quadrants, because when they're starting to get on a roll and when they are communicating, they'll often use a lot of detail. And so for a D style person, they can get frustrated because the D is thinking, oh, just get to the point. But for the C, that is the point. The detail is really important. So these people are excellent at attention to detail types of work. Any questions about a C? Is there anyone who thinks they're a C? I'm most intrigued.
There's no questions in the Q&A yet.
Okay.
Sorry, there is one. Are C's seen to be manipulative, do you think?
Not manipulative. I haven't had feedback, or I haven't really seen a C that is outwardly going manipulative, but they can be, as I said, passive aggressive. So they will tend to, if they disagree with something, they're not going to tell you outright, or if they don't like someone, they're not going to tell that person outright, but they will maybe undermine, or they will what's called work to rule. They're not going to adopt the change if they don't have to. Yeah. Okay, so let's do a quick little poll. Kyle, I know you've got a poll set up. For those of you that have had the opportunity to be able to do that online test that was sent through, let me know, what did you come out as?
Just launching it now. So
Lovely.
everyone, you should be seeing that on your screen now. We'll just leave it open for about 30 seconds for everyone to complete. Ooh, a good mixture.
We can't see it yet. You'll have to let us know.
I'll share it. Just another 10 seconds, everyone.
And have there been any other questions pop up whilst we've been doing this?
All right, I'm just going to share the results. It's interesting. There's quite an even split. The highest one being dominance.
Ah. Oh yeah, by a whisker. Look at that. Okay, interesting. So quite an even, yeah.
So we have a question here. How can you best read a C given they withhold expression?
That's your read. So in terms of if you're trying to determine what profile they are, if you're not getting much expression, C or a D, but generally a C, a D will be quite big in their body language. But in terms of reading the individual, if they are a C, I would be looking for, if they're a stranger, so I'd be looking for things like pulling away from the table or the conversation or averting eyes. If they are someone that you know and they're a C, you should be able to understand when they're feeling happy about something because they'll want to get involved versus when they're unhappy about something. There's that withdrawal. They'll get a little bit quieter and sort of shut down a little bit. But again, really depends on the individual and the relationship you've got with them.
Are C's uncommon leaders? Do you know any successful C leaders?
Yes, I do. Yep, absolutely. What we tend to find is in the, I'm just thinking about in the not the construction industry, but more mining, the engineering space, they'll tend to be C leaders. And that's a really good point to make. Each of the profiles can make great leaders. I've seen S's be exceptional leaders. I've seen D's be great leaders, but I've also seen D's be terrible leaders. Your profile doesn't necessitate whether you can be an effective leader. There's so many other aspects around being effective as in a leadership position. What is most important is that you are aware, self-aware of what style you are, and then understand how your behavioural preferences are either going to support you in a certain circumstance or whether they're going to hinder you. And then what can you do about it to have a successful outcome? Oh, you're on mute, Kyle.
Do you want to take one more on this one, Teagan, before we move on?
Yep, go for it.
Do C's look to please often and remain quiet with their opinions?
S's will tend to please more. S's tend to be more focused on making others happy and holding back on their opinions. If a C is unhappy or disagrees with something, they will probably voice it, but maybe not in a public circumstance. So yeah, C's will tell you, more likely to tell you that something won't work or that they don't think something can be done, and tell you why if it's one-on-one rather than in a big group environment. But an S is more likely to please. S and I. Okay.
There's a few other questions coming through. We might save them to the end.
Great idea. Okay, so in our short amount of time left, because time is ticking, I'm going to talk to you about the best way to relate to each of the styles. So from that little overview, if you have an idea on what type of style you are, what we tend to find is that people who are on opposite parts of the quadrant, so D and S or I and C, they will tend to find it the most tricky to connect because they're not sharing a border of the profile, if that makes sense. So, okay, if you are trying to relate to a D, the best thing you can do is just get to the point. Make sure that you are talking about the work and the task first. Don't come in and talk to them about what you did on the weekend or this amazing new restaurant you found or whatever it is. Get to the point, get to the job stuff first. Then if there's time afterwards, and kind of only if they open the conversation, then start talking about the friendly stuff. What I found is that when I'm working with D leaders, they'll want to talk business straight up. They'll want to talk about what are the things that I'm doing that can actually help them look good. That's another influencing tactic. But I've found that as soon as they start to tell me about some personal things or some non-business related conversation, that means you've got your relationship's getting stronger with them. So that's a bit of a measuring stick for you. Make sure that when you are presenting information to them, it's it's dot point, it's not long or convoluted, and make sure that if you are trying to work with them or get them to change something, that you're there to actually be a collaborator with them, that you're not there to tell them how to do something, but you're there to work with them. The other thing is really important to try and find ways to let them make the decision. So, you've probably all heard about how to influence people. Some really tricky people is get them to think they came up with the idea. That is so true for a D. What I've also often suggested and utilized myself is if you know that there is a direction that you have to go, but you know that they'll get upset if you don't cover it off with them, use the tricky line around, oh, you said, Mrs. D, you said something the other day that made me start thinking about X, Y, and Z. What do you reckon if I did blah, blah, blah? And that gives the D the opportunity to go, yeah, absolutely, that's what I was trying to get to. It helps them to feel that they had control. If you need to disagree with them, try and disagree with the facts and not the person. So provide evidence where you can, and try not to let it get personal. And when you are trying to shift their behaviour, don't give them any wiggle room. So make sure there's no loopholes. Make sure that you close out conversations at the end by recounting what it is that is going to change and what both of you are going to do. All right, relating to an I. So remember, these are your big thinker pitch people. If you can, let them have space to dream big. They are creative and they can get really frustrated if they don't have that ability to be creative. Let them find time in work or even outside of work, but to socialize, to build that inclusivity in the team. Remember, they're people focused, so they need to feel that there's a good vibe amongst the people in the team. They are the oversharers, as I said, so actually ask them about what their interests are. Ask them what they did on the weekend. What are they working on? What's their goals at the moment? What we did say as well, though, because that they are always thinking about lots of different things, they aren't very good at executing. So you can really help them by putting goals in writing and getting them to be very clear around what are the steps that they need to take and the milestones. And then work with them to check in. How are they going on those milestones, keeping them focused? They like to be able to give their opinion on things. They like to be asked and included. So if there's a discussion that's going to impact the whole team, the I really gets value from being included in that. But they also like to hear the opinions of others. So if they really respect someone, you know that they respect someone, and you need to influence a change with an I, you can start to use testimonials from the person that they respect, that this is a great idea, this is going to work, because an I is really influenced by the opinions of other people that they respect. And that last point there is, don't be too rigid. They get very, very fidgety and very contained when they feel that things are when there's not a lot of free flowing or creativity, as I mentioned. They need that. Yes, you need some structure, but overt rigidity is very demotivating for an I. Our S person, they're the steadiness person. So it's all about gently building that relationship. Start gently, break the ice, have a nice conversation up front. Opposite to a D, which is all about get to the point, get to business. And S is actually, it's beneficial to have that nice conversation up front. It eases them, it strengthens the relationship, and then we ease into the business side of things. So if you need to talk about something that's uncomfortable, it's about being non-threatening, watching your body language, it's not too overt, but also then look for those little cues about early disagreement or any sort of dissatisfaction. When it comes to change, you've got to be patient and make sure that you're working with them to show that there's going to be support for them through this time process, through the changes, and try and weave in their personal goals. So helping them to realize that together we can work on their goals and what they can achieve. So the best thing you can do is don't be abrupt, don't be rapid, don't rush. Make sure that you are trying to be really clear, minimize any uncertainty, come back to them with answers, keep them up to date on any changes that might be happening, and always seek for how they're going. Just keep asking, how are you feeling about this? Any concerns? Don't force them into feeling that they have to agree with something. C person. So relating to a C, just be straight to the point. Similar to a D, stick to business on their terms, so they won't like a lot of fluff and high energy. It's just, let's talk about the job that needs to be done. They will likely have a lot of questions to ask. So if you are presenting information to a C, make sure that you are prepared. Think ahead around what are the questions that they could ask me. What are the pros and cons for each of the scenarios that may be a possibility. And then make sure that you are well researched, that you're accurate, that you haven't made a mistake. One of the biggest ways to turn a C off and for them to really, if you to damage your reputation with a C, is to look underprepared or make a small mistake. They, unfortunately, a C will focus on that small mistake, which could be something as silly as the letter is the wrong color, or you misspelt a word. That can, if a C's not feeling too positive about you anyway, that can mean that they'll turn off to you and they'll just cast you aside. When you're trying to implement changes, give them time to decide, let them come up with a schedule to implement actions, get them involved in that implementation program. Minimize surprises. Like an S, don't come up with these last minute ideas because they haven't been factored in. The C will not enjoy that at all. Don't use opinions as evidence. And as the last one there is just chill, just be calm. Don't be too energetic and in their face. So guys, that was a really big run through of the DISC, well, a really quick run through, I should say, of the DISC model. Now this process usually takes, half a day to go through with a team. I hope that you took some little takeaways from there. What I do want you to make sure you think about is when you are trying to read someone and understand their style, have a think about or observe, how do they act? So what's their body language like? Is it big or is it sort of reserved? What do they say? What is the language? Is it people focused? Is it us and we, team, or is it task, job, goal? And then what are they prioritizing? So think around, what is it, the things that they talk about the most? Is it culture or is it achievement? Righto, so that brings me to the end. We've got hopefully a little bit of time for questions. We started a little late, so hopefully we've got some time. But if you do have any further questions that we don't get to today, my contact details are down there. I'm more than happy for you to send me an email if you need to. Otherwise, jump on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, just under the BCW, and we can have a chat.
Thanks so much, Teagan. We do have a couple of minutes now to answer some more questions. So we've got a bit of a queue here of questions that I'll select a couple from. Yeah. So the question relates back to the environment question asked earlier. Do you come across people who have different behaviours depending on the specific situation?
Yes, Yes, me, for instance. So because every environment I go into is very different. Every leader that I've got to form a relationship with quickly is very different. My behavior will change. Now, as I mentioned before, it's not being inauthentic, it's just making small adjustments. So for instance, when I'm a D, it's all business. But if I'm chatting with an I, I'm a lot more relaxed, I'm more animated with my hands. So yes, think around what's the environment I'm going into, what is the style of the person or people that I'll be interacting with, and what do I need to adjust in my style, knowing my natural preference to how to act. What little things, what behaviors can I tweak? Because remember, behavior we can change. Personality is the constant.
Is being a C going to hamper your ability to move up in positions, as it seems the quality of your work is no longer as important as selling yourself?
Yeah. Extroverts, hey, they're their best marketing team. Look, I would encourage you to have a look into the power of introverts. So there's some really interesting, there's a book by that title and a TED Talk. Being any profile will not hinder you in your progression. What will hinder you is not being aware, not being self-aware. The most effective leaders that I've found are people who know themselves well, that they understand their strengths and their limitations and are willing to adjust and be flexible in their style. I know I keep harping on this, but I don't want you to think that because you're a certain style that you can't progress, because we actually need more introvert leaders, and we need people who aren't just that, the great person who sells themselves, the gift of the gab. We can't have leaders just like that in organizations, because we need to create diversity. We need to create better inclusion for everyone. So if you have an aspiration to be a leader, any style that you have can be an effective leader.
We might take one more. I'm just conscious of the time. Would you recommend tactics or tips to build trust in others and strangers?
Gosh, that's a big question. I guess to answer it simply and quickly, to build trust with people like what is like them. And so, as I said to you, if you start getting really familiar with this model, in the first 10 minutes, you can start of interacting with someone, you can start to understand what their profile might be. It's a might. It's a piece of the jigsaw of the puzzle of who the person is. And then you want to natural mirror in a way. And people start to relax when they feel that you are on their level, that you're similar to them. And so when people start to relax, then you can start to build a better relationship, and you can start to get them to trust a little bit more. But trust is a big term, and trust will mean different things to different people. But I guess the first step is to build that sense of commonality.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Teagan. I think we might leave it there for questions. So we have run over time a little bit.
Yeah.
So I might wrap up. Okay, big thanks to you, Teagan. Thanks very much for presenting today, and also a big thanks to everyone for participating. We hope you found the session interesting and have been able to take away something useful, some useful information and insights. For those of you who would like to use today as part of your CPD hours, make sure you keep a copy of the confirmation email that you would have received as proof of your attendance. And as mentioned at the beginning, this session is the first of 3 different professional development sessions we're delivering over the next couple of weeks. So the next one is next Thursday, the 23rd of July from 11 a.m. till 12 p.m. with Dr. Kim Ball. Dr. Ball will be talking about the project team selection process and understanding how it works and developing networking relationships for your professional development and career success. So that'll be a great session. Registrations are still open and will be open until next Wednesday. So jump online and register if you're interested. The web address is there on the screen. and keep up to date by connecting with us on our social media channels as we post news and events as they come up. And I think that's it. So big thanks to you again, Teagan. Thanks for everyone for participating. And we look forward to seeing you all at a Women in Engineering event soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Kyle.